This is the 2021 Mini Cooper JCW GP, and it is the ultimate Mini. It is the ultimate in several ways. One is price. This has a sticker price of just under $46,000, which is huge for a two-door Mini. But it's also the ultimate performer. This has 301 horsepower, which is more than a Volkswagen Golf R and about the same as a Honda Civic Type R in a Mini. It's ridiculous, and today I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my new online enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. If you're looking to sell a cool car from the 80s and up, sell it on Cars and Bids. It is the place to sell cool cars from this era. And if you're looking to buy a cool car from the 80s and up, Cars and Bids has a great selection with cool live auctions every day. So check out Cars and Bids at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this Mini from CREVIER Mini here in Orange County in Southern California. CREVIER Mini, of course, has all of the latest Mini models, including the new JCW GP, and you can find other cool cars here, manual transmissions and fun driving experiences without spending big money for a Porsche or a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Check out CREVIER Mini by clicking the link in the description below. Okay, so let's talk GP. If you're looking for a fun Mini, the base model is relatively enjoyable. It comes with a turbocharged 3-cylinder that makes about 130 horsepower. Or, if you want more, you can step up to the Cooper S, which comes with a turbo 4-cylinder that makes about 190 horsepower. Or, if you want more, you can step up to the John Cooper Works model, which has about 230 horsepower. Or, if you want even more, you can step up to this, the John Cooper Works GP, as it's officially called, with 301 horsepower. That makes this the most powerful, highest performance Mini ever, and it also makes it a serious contender among today's top hot hatchbacks. It isn't just power. This car has a lowered ride height compared to a standard Mini and stiffer sport suspension. The back seats have been removed to save weight and to allow Mini to add chassis stiffness. It has larger brakes than a regular Mini and larger wheels. And there are all sorts of exterior changes to make sure you're aware this isn't a regular Mini, this is a fast Mini that does 0 to 60 in 5 seconds. It's also an expensive Mini. Like I said, this one has a sticker price of just under $46,000. So today I'm going to take you on a tour of the Mini Cooper JCW GP, and I'm going to show you all of the quirks and features of the top model in the Mini hatchback lineup. Then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a DougScore. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the GP with one of its most notable exterior differences compared to a regular Mini. That would be the brakes, which are huge. 14-inch front brakes, which are massive for a car the size of a Mini. It also has 18-inch wheels, which are also very big for a car the size of a Mini. And the wheels are wider than the ones in the standard Mini too, so you could get on wider tires for better grip. But when you widen the wheels and tires of a car, then they stick out past the fenders, and that is not allowed by government regulation. Most automakers widen the fenders to accommodate the wider wheels, but Mini did something a little different. They stuck on these panels. This is carbon fiber reinforced plastic, CFRP, and you can see these panels stick out just wide enough front and back in order to cover these wider wheels and tires. It gives this car a very unusual look. Like there's just these random panels sticking up next to and above the wheels, which I guess is actually true, frankly. This was Mini's decision instead of just creating wider flared fenders like most other automakers would, and it certainly gives the GP a rather distinctive look. And speaking of these panels, I want to move on to one of the most unusual things about this entire car, and that would be this number that's printed on the front panel. You can see it says 0564. That's the production number of this Mini. They're only building 3,000 of these JCW GP models, and each car will have its special serial number printed on the front weird panel thing, both on the driver's side and over on the passenger side. The number is printed there too. So this is the 564th car in the production run. That is so unusual. Typically, limited production cars have a little plaque in the interior letting you know where they fall in the production run, but this car has it printed on the front fender in giant font. And that's how you know where your Mini falls in the GP production line. But there are a lot more changes than that on the outside of the GP. One rather subtle one is that the Mini badge is painted black. You can see on the hood you have a black Mini badge because it looks cooler. Less subtle is the front end design, which is just far more aggressive, mean, angry, bolder. It has a sports car front end to really remind you that this is not a standard Mini by any means. And it's the same story in back, where it's also tremendously clear that this is not a standard Mini. For one thing, the rear bumper is just lower to the ground, giving this car a more aggressive stance, and you have two giant exhaust tips right in the center, again for a sportier, more aggressive, more sports car look. But the most obvious change back here is undoubtedly the wing, which is massive, truly huge. Take a look at this wing. It has become a hallmark of previous Mini GP models to have a giant wing like this, but this is a whole new level of wing. For one thing, it literally has two levels. There's an upper and lower portion of the wing, and it is just hugely gigantic with GP printed on either end. But my very favorite part of the wing is the fact that in the middle, it kind of dips down, like there's a cutout. So what is that for? Well, when you open up the rear hatch, the wing lifts up too, and the cutout is necessary in order to clear the antenna, which is mounted on the roof near the back. You can see it fits snugly into this little wing hole that they made for it, and so that's why the wing kind of comes down in the middle to accommodate the antenna. That is a hilarious piece of design, but a necessary one, and it's kind of interesting to see how they did that. But the simple existence of the giant wing and the strangely flared fenders isn't the only unusual thing about them. When you have that stuff on a car, you can't treat it exactly like a normal car in terms of washing it. In fact, there is a warning label on the outside of the car that specifically says car wash unsuitability, with an image of a car and a car wash and a slash through it. No automatic car wash, hand wash only. And it also says this label must be retained until customer handover. In other words, you have to leave this label in until the customer takes delivery so they know you can't wash the car in an automatic car wash. There is another one of these labels inside the windshield pointing towards the driver. This vehicle is not suitable for automated car washes, hand wash only. Now, the reason I suspect that they're so careful to point this out is that the wing and these weird fenders could get caught on some component of a car wash and ripped right off, and they don't want that, so you have to hand wash your GP, and they really remind you of it so you don't have a little issue. And next up, some other exterior items worth pointing out with the GP. One is the sheer number of times it reminds you that it's the GP. You have one GP badge here on the front grille, bright red, so you know it's a GP from the front. You have another GP badge in the back, again telling you that it's a GP. It says GP on the wing, both sides in massive print, again reminding you that it's a GP, and you have 4 separate GP badges as the center cap for the wheels, meaning you have 8 different GP badges just on the outside of this car. And that's not counting like the red stripe on the doors or the wheels or the color combination of the giant wing, other GP reminders this car gives you. Needless to say, this vehicle isn't really subtle about the fact that it's the special Mini. And by the way, an exterior item that I love with this car, also true of other Mini models, is the taillights, because they make a British flag. You have half the flag on the left, half the flag on the right, and that is just a really cool Easter egg you don't really notice until you notice, and it's so cool that they did that. Never mind the fact that Mini is owned by BMW, and the heritage of Mini is British, hence the British flag. Now up front, there's also an interesting lighting item, and that's the fact that the headlights stay put when you open up the hood. Open the hood and you can see the headlights stay fixed. That is by regulation. The government says that headlights cannot raise up with a movable piece of bodywork, and so automakers with headlights integrated into the hood have to make a cutout to keep the headlights fixed, just like the Mini does. Now, once you get under the hood, the first thing you're greeted with is, no surprise, a giant GP badge. Again, bright red, again reminding you what this vehicle is. Now, like I mentioned, this engine, turbocharged 4-cylinder, over 300 horsepower, which is an insane figure for a car this size. It's also a 75 horsepower boost over the regular Mini JCW, which is the high performance version of the regular Mini lineup. And it's twice the power that the base model has. It's very rare you get a car that has a double spread from the base model to the top version, but that's the situation here. More than double the horsepower of the standard Mini in the JCW GP. Now, other changes to this car, I already mentioned the larger wheels and larger brakes, but you also have a lowered ride height and stiffer suspension, both for better handling on the racetrack. But undoubtedly the biggest change to the GP over the standard Mini, aside from the extra engine power, is not the giant rear wing or the weird flared fenders. Instead, it's the back seat, because it's been removed. Unlike every other Mini model, this has no back seat. It's a two-seater. The back seat is gone for two reasons. One is to save weight. Back seats weigh a lot. You take them out, you weigh less, and you're faster. The other is so that Mini could stick this giant chassis stiffening bar across the middle of the car and stiffen up the chassis right behind the front seats. And that way, not only are you saving weight by removing the back seat, but you're actually adding rigidity, and that's what minifigures you'll want from the ultimate high-performance Mini. Now, I will say this probably does help both acceleration and steering and handling, but it is a drawback in terms of practicality. To me, the whole point of a hot hatchback is it's hot, but it's also a practical hatchback, and this car with only two seats is certainly less practical than some of its hot hatch rivals as a result of the removed back seats and that bar. But there's more to discuss in here, of course. For one thing, just like on the outside, there's an insane amount of badging in here to remind you that this is the GP. For instance, the door sill proudly says GP on it. Take a look at these seats and you can see you have nice grippy sport seats with red stitching like you'd expect from the sport model, and you also have a little GP badge by the headrest, because of course you do. The shift paddles are these nice metal paddles with little holes in them, and at the very bottom they say GP, because of course they do. And rounding out your GP badges in here on the dashboard, you can see it says GP, and once again gives the production number of this car, 0564, meaning they have to make one of these little plastic panels for every single individual GP model with an individual number on it. But again, it's a cool reminder of which one is yours and the fact that you have a special edition. But anyway, another interesting quirk, when you climb into your GP, the first thing you notice is that the starter button is pulsing in the center. There's this red pulsing light around it, kind of goading you on to turning on the car. Come on, let's go have fun, it thinks. First, I want to talk about one of the coolest car interior quirks in the entire car industry right now, and that would be the little LED lights that circle around this infotainment screen. All right, check this out. Right now, I'm just sitting in the car and I start to rev the engine, and you can see these little lights increase to match the tachometer. They'll show your engine revs when you're driving around, which is so cool. A giant LED lighted rev counter. Or you go to change the the stereo volume, and you can see these little lights change with the stereo volume to let you know how loud you have your music in a giant center LED display. The coolest one though is the climate controls. You adjust the fan speed, and once again the little LEDs show you where your fan speed is, but better than that, you adjust the temperature and they show you where you are, blue for cold, red for hot, and you can adjust and see how your temperature setting changes relative to blue and red on this giant LED half circle. I think this is one of the coolest things. It's a great way to integrate more fun and more quirkiness into the center of the Mini. Now, as for the infotainment system itself, I don't quite have as many positive things to say. I actually like this infotainment system. It is surprisingly intuitive, easy to use. Everything works how it should. You tap it and it does exactly what you want. And there's a backup set of controls in the center next to your parking brake. So if you don't want to use it as a touchscreen, you can basically do what makes you feel more comfortable. The problem I have is the screen is just so small. You have a large circle in here, but then they've adapted a rather tiny rectangle inside that circle, and it's just little. And that means the menus and the readouts in the screen are also small, so you kind of have to strain your eyes to read them. And when you're touching stuff, also small buttons and menus to touch. It's just not ideal in this age of growing infotainment screens in the middle. With that said, this car isn't exactly short on screens, because now in the latest Mini, the gauge cluster is a screen as well. You can see mounted right behind the steering wheel, this is a screen rather than your traditional old school gauges. Unfortunately, not really all that configurable, so it's not like you can take stuff from the center screen and put it here like you can in some other cars, but it is nice to see a screen there, very crisp readout, a lot of information able to be displayed, and I do like this little checkered flag graphic at the top of the speedometer. It just looks cool and it's fitting with the character of this car. And by the way, also on the gauge cluster, as you can see, there is another GP logo, in case you had forgotten with any of the other GP logos throughout the car. Anyway, moving on to a few other interesting quirks and features in here. One, back to the seats. They're manual seats, manually adjustable. No power adjustment at all, even though this car, like I mentioned, almost $46,000. That is a tough pill to swallow, although many would say, well, it's a sports car. Of course it has manually adjustable seats. Still, it'd be nice to have power seats. And next up, another sports car touch. And here on the steering wheel, you can see there's a little strip at the top of the wheel that looks like sort of mesh metal material. That is so you know where the center of your wheel is on the track. If you're doing hand-over-hand driving or making sharp turns, you'll always know where you're centered in sort of your periphery because of that strip there. One other interesting quirk I like in here is the interior door handle. You can see it's this circle. The chrome part on the left is the door handle itself. The thing I like is when you pull to open, the lock and unlock buttons pull with the door handle, which is kind of a nifty way to do it. It's all integrated into this one little piece. Your door locks are right with your door handle where you'd think they would be. And next up, another interesting quirk in this car, because it's a Mini, very small, the center console is not large as you might expect, but it does have a neat little cell phone charger in here, just large enough for a phone, stick it in, and it's a wireless charger that starts charging your phone when you put it in there, which is a nice way to take advantage of a relatively small center console. Also in the center, you can see this car's transmission, and yes, it does have an automatic. In fact, all of these GP models come with an automatic transmission. Many said that was because they didn't have a manual that could handle the power and torque that this car makes. You can only get an automatic in the GP, which is a little disappointing considering the rather racy nature of the rest of this car. And one other interesting quirk I like about the GP and other Minis is the shape of the key. Very distinctive, very unusual, very quirky, kind of like Mini itself. One thing I especially like is that they've integrated the lock button into the Mini logo. So you want to lock the doors, you press the Mini logo, which is kind of cool. Although you'll notice there's also a little lock icon next to the Mini logo. You just know that's there because someone complained, I don't understand, what do I push to lock it? I don't get it. Can't you just put a lock button on there? I don't understand. So Mini was like, fine, stop calling our customer service hotline. We will put a lock icon. And so they did. It would look better without it, but it's there for the annoying people. And so those are the quirks and features of the Mini Cooper JCW GP. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the John Cooper Works GP Mini Cooper. It's a long name for a little car. Step on it here. Woo-hoo-hoo. Quick with a great sensation of speed. Feels very fast. It also is very fast, but it really feels that you're low, and of course the cars are connected and little and everything, and that's a lot of fun. It certainly feels faster than a Civic Type R, even though I don't think it actually is. I think they're right on the same cusp. Like Civic Type R is high 4, 0, 60, this is 5 flat. One of the big problems, of course, with this car is the lack of a manual transmission. It's such a shame. Mini has kind of been cagey about whether one is coming. Given they're only making 3,000, this is already number 564. I suspect it better show up soon, otherwise it ain't gonna happen. Looking around this interior, there's just so many cool details everywhere, and that's one of the coolest things about Mini. There's just so many little things that are so exciting and interesting and neat. This is surprisingly quick. You do get a little torque steer, more than you'd expect from a modern car, given that so many automakers have figured out a way to engineer themselves out of it. It does feel go-karty. This is one way that it's definitely more, I guess, enjoyable than a Golf R. It has this feel of immediacy and immediate responsiveness and go anywhere and quick action, and it just has more of like a small, tiny little throw it around car feel. Golf R feels like a more grown-up, rational automobile. I will say the ride is harsh, unusually so. You know, a lot of cars have a sport mode or a suspension mode or whatever. This car just comes one way. They figure if you're going up to a JCW GP, then you probably want it to be harsh and sporty the whole time. And that's fine. It's just that it is harsh and sporty the whole time. And so when you get this car, make absolutely certain it's what you're looking for, because I don't think it would be hard to daily drive this, but I could see it getting annoying. Every bump you feel, it is an unusually harsh ride. Ford Focus RS is known for having a harsh ride. This is right up there. It's so quick. But there's a lot of torque steer. It's a bit of a handful when you floor it. Not a lot of torque steer, but you're definitely fighting a little bit to keep it going straight. Just trying to pull in either direction, and you have to kind of make sure you know what you're doing. Man, the ride it is a bumpy ride in here. Truthfully though, this car is a lot of fun. The steering is fantastic. It is really, really well, nicely weighted and very precise and quick. Just as you'd expect from a Mini. That stuff Minis are still fun, even though they've kind of lost a little bit of the reputation for just enjoyable little performance cars that are affordable. I will say trying to turn under hard acceleration is a bit of a problem in this car, because there's so much power going to those front wheels. You really are kind of fighting it and making sure it wants to go in the direction that you want it to go. This is a fun car with a fun interior. I love how it looks in here. I think it's really cool. It drives well. It's reasonably fast. There are definitely some drawbacks to this car though. Only 2 seats is a big one. Competitors are faster with more seats, and it's just really expensive for a Mini. But I don't know, I think it's a lot of fun, and this is certainly the ultimate Mini. These GP models have been pretty cool in the past, but this one is now like the coolest of the GP Minis, and it's a special vehicle, and I think it's cool. $46,000 cool. Bit of a tough sell, especially with manual seats. And so that's the 2021 Mini Cooper John Cooper Works GP, the highest performance Mini ever. This car isn't as practical as some of the other hot hatchbacks, and frankly, it's not faster either, but it is smaller and nimbler and more go-karty, and if you're into the Mini brand, this is the ultimate flex. And now it's time to give the GP a DougScore. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Mini is an attractive car in general, but the GP is a bit overboard, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Handling is good, very sharp for a front-wheel drive hatchback, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is good. It's a very fun car, although it's dulled a bit by the automatic transmission, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Cool factor is decent enough. These are very cool to Mini fans, but otherwise just another neat hot hatch contender, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 29 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The Mini does fine, normal for a car like this in terms of tech, though a bit behind with some comfort stuff, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is actually not so great. This car has a lot of interior room and such, but the ride is unusually harsh. Not as bad as most sports cars, but pretty rough for a hot hatch. It gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is excellent. Interior materials are great, better than most hot hatch rivals, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is a bit low. This doesn't score as well as other hot hatches here because the back seats are removed. Still, it does have a huge
huge cargo area, so it's somewhat practical, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Finally, value, and this is a cool car, but it's also an expensive car, especially compared to other hot hatches. It gets an average 5 out of 10 for a total daily score of 27 out of 50. Added up, and the DougScore is 56 out of 100, which puts the GP here against hot hatchbacks and other relevant cars. It's last, but it's not last in weekend categories. In fact, the GP ties the Golf R and the Civic Type R, and it would do even better if it had 3 pedals. The GP's big issue is daily categories. It's a harsh ride, it gives up practicality, and it's expensive compared to hot hatch rivals that are just as fast. Still, this is a cool car, and indeed, the ultimate mini.